time on this day. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please do the same. All right, moving on. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
I move to adopt the minutes from the previous meeting of February.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please do the same. All right, and then we'll move on to our open issue, which is on an update around the attendance areas process timeline, and we're going to be getting that from Karen, who is our partner, our consultant with Cooperative Strategies. Yes. And then if you don't mind just pushing the button on that once you start talking so that everyone can hear you. You're good. Yeah,
Okay.
when there's no light, it means it's good.
I'm sure I will mess this up at some point. Well, thanks for having me. As Blake said, I'm Karen Jackson with Wolpert now. It used to be Cooperative Strategies. We just went through a name change, so you're going to see Wolpert on our documents. I'm probably going to mess up and call it Cooperative Strategies still a little bit too. So same company, just different name. The first document I am going to talk about is the presentations. That's this one, nice and pretty there. And throughout this, we'll kind of get into our other document here. If you go to the first couple of pages, this is just showing who we are. We do this kind of work all over the country. Over the last couple years, we have worked here as well. So I'm very familiar with Columbia Public Schools and how we got to where we did and what we're dealing with today. The next page just shows our overall attendance area process.
I just want to make sure you can hear it.
Are we good? Okay, I can move it a little bit too.
That's for our live stream, so for our
Ooh.
people that are watching, I just want to make sure everyone can hear you.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'll move it a little bit closer too. So this just details our overall process. We do use an iterative process. So once we present boundary options to the community, we will then take that feedback that we get from them and go back to the drawing board. If we need to, of course, if there's an option that overwhelmingly is just excellent and everybody loves it, that's probably what we'll recommend. But oftentimes that's not the case. There's something we've missed, so that's why we really utilize that feedback. So moving on to our next slide, this just shows our remaining timeline. So April 1st, we're planning to have listening session open house at Russell Boulevard. This is just to talk about phase one, which phase one in our plan is just going to be to fill the addition that's going to open for Russell next year. April 18th or May 13th, these are both board. I think the 18th is a work session, May 13th is an official board meeting in the evening. We're hoping to get phase one approval. This is not going to have a huge impact across the district. It is literally just going to be to fill that new capacity at Russell. May 7th through 9th, we will have open houses for phases 2 and 3. We're planning to do multiple meetings throughout the day where we'll come in, we'll have our open house, folks can come in, ask us questions. We will have released all of the information ahead of time, so people should be able to view it to see if they're impacted. If they are impacted and want to come talk to us, great, that is exactly what those are for. May 13th, we will be, I will be back here with another board update for you all just to go over what we heard at the listening sessions as well as the feedback that we received in our online survey. Just something else to know, April 29th to May 10th is the timeline for our online survey. So April 29th is when we are intending for all of our options to come out. Again, we'll have phase one figured out by then, hopefully, and then we'll have our phase 2 and 3 options after that. June 10th will be a board update where we're going to present the final options and a summary of all the feedback that we received for you to really mull over. And then July 8th, we are hoping to get you to vote on phases 2 and 3 of the plan.
Karen, that open houses that would be happening on May 7th through 9th.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of open houses with different partners, right? So I wanted to see if you could remind us, like, how does that open house structure look like and how y'all run it?
Sure. So what we'll do is let's say it's in like a high school commons or something or it'll be in an open area like that. We will have big maps. So I'm talking like 36 inches by 36 inches. Folks can come take a look at it. We'll also have an online locator available, and that's a little bit easier because you can just plug in your address and it'll spit out exactly where you're assigned in each of the options. In one of the corners, we'll probably have a recorded presentation playing. So if folks haven't listened to it already, they can come in, listen to it, and then we will be available, me as well as I think representatives from my company and representatives from the district will be available to talk to folks and give you an idea of exactly like why we made certain decisions, why certain moves were made and things like that. So those are pretty much come and go as you please. They're probably going to be 2 or 3 hours each, so folks can just come in at their leisure. And like I said, we will have multiple opportunities throughout the day, so we'll probably have a during the day option and an evening option for those who are interested.
I have a question, Blake, about this. So April 29th through May 10th is when you guys send out that survey. And I remember the last time, I believe you guys sent like 4 potential maps with it, and we kind of commented on those things. And the open houses are going to be the 7th through the 9th. So is that going to be like the kind of similar information as to what you're sending out in the survey? Okay, and
It'll
then
be
you're going to
exactly the
collect
same.
all that stuff. And,
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was
Yeah.
wondering.
So
Okay.
the 28th is when everything will be released, but we'll be showing the same exact options during
Okay.
the 7th through 9th.
Okay.
For folks. All right. So this time is going to be a little bit different than last time in the fact that we're using a diversity index. So if you go to the slide that kind of looks like this, we really have figured out that free and reduced lunch, while it is an important metric, and it's great information to have, it's not everything. It is limiting. If you have noticed all of our charts, at the middle and elementary level, we're seeing about like 41, 42% free and reduced lunch, but then all of a sudden at the high school, we're at 32%. More than likely, that's due to underreporting. We don't actually have 10% less students that should be receiving it, but we just aren't getting that. We aren't getting that those applications. So we've decided to implement a diversity index. And what this does is it looks at block group data. So we're taking 3 different metrics within census block group data: the percentage of the non-white or minority population, the average level of adult educational attainment, and then the average household income. So the household income kind of plays in line with the free and reduced lunch. And that is what this document shows. So this is like a little white paper that gives a history of the diversity index, why we're doing it, some other examples of districts that use it across the country. This is not unique to Columbia. There are many other districts that deal with this and want to look at diversity in different ways. So if you go onto the next page in our slideshow, this is showing our first category, which is race. Something to note about this, so we are not able to use race in this process at the student level. The Supreme Court, I think in 2007, deemed it to be unconstitutional to try to balance diversity based on race at the student level, but we can look at it at the block group level. So it's not tied to any individual student. So what we do is look at, within each block group, the percentage of the non-white population. So each of these slides is going to show a different, it's one of your block groups. I don't know which one. It's one that I chose at random from the list. But in this block group in particular, you can see the number of people by race within the block group, and then the minority population in this one in particular is going to be 28%. Now what we do is we take all of your block groups and split them into thirds. So we assign a number to them based on that third that they fall within. So anything that is less than 20% minority population, so not very diverse, is going to be given a category 1. Anything between 20 and almost 30% is going to be given a category 2. And then anything over 30% minority population is given a category 3. And this document really explains it in more detail.
Can you explain what a block group is?
Yeah. So a census block group is the smallest geography that the census uses. And essentially what they do is they split up areas into just like smaller geographies with, I think there's like a population number associated with it. I don't remember exactly what that is. I guess we could look on here, huh? It's 2,500 in this one, so it's probably somewhere around there for each block group. And they're just census delineated places. Some of them make more sense than others, but just something to note, they don't actually follow the district boundaries perfectly. And you'll see that when I get to a map. There are some that have a teeny tiny little portion in the district and the rest is like out in Callaway County or something like that. So yeah, that's just the geography we're using, and that is the smallest geography that the census gives us data in. So our next category is going to be the average level of adult educational attainment. This is for populations greater than 25 years old within the block group. So this is not everybody. What the census gives us is the greatest level per person. So I have a bachelor's degree, for example, so I would not be counted under like high school diploma or 9th through 12th grade or anything like that. I would be counted under bachelor's because that is the highest level of education that I have. So that's kind of how you read this. We do apply a weight to each of those categories. So we take the percentage of each block group that have attained each level and apply a weight to it. Anything higher is going to be more educated, anything lower is going to be less educated. So in our example here, our weighted educational attainment for this block group in particular is 4.63. So this is a very highly educated area. I will tell you, this community is very highly educated in general, so the numbers that I'm seeing, like the weighted averages that I'm seeing are higher than
What you normally see.
Yes, most definitely. So category 1 in this case is going to be anything that's greater than 4.07. Category 2 is going to be the weighted averages between 3.75 and 4.06, and then anything less than 3.74 is going to be given a category 3. Again, that's just done by splitting all of your block groups into thirds. So the highest get a 1, lowest get a 3. And then looking at our income, we are looking at the average household income. This does differ a little bit from like the median household income for block groups. But we're taking that average household income, and again, I split it into thirds, and the highest third is given a 1, middle 2, and then the lowest 3. So a category 1 for the average household income for any block group within the district is going to be anything that's greater than or equal to $98,500 per year. Anything between $60,000 and $98,500 is going to be a 2, and then anything that's less than or equal to $60,000 a year is going to be a category 3. So in our little example block group, the average household income was $32,534, which would be given a category of 3. So we have our 3 different categories. We have a 1 for, I think it was a 1 for race. Now I gotta go back and look. A 2 for race, a 1 for educational attainment, and then a 3 for income. So if you go to the next page, this kind of shows how this kind of shakes out within the district. So each category is given an equal weight of 33% or 1/3. We multiply the category by 1/3 to get our total diversity category for that block group. So in this case, we do 2 times a third plus 1 times a third for our education and 3 times a third for our income, which gives us a diversity category of 2. This is what we assign to every block group. So if you look at the next my little example block group that I just drew, it's a nice little picture, I know. There are 10 kids in this. Each dot represents 1 kid, and each of those kids that live within that block group, does not matter what race they are, what their individual income is, what their parents' educational attainment is. Each one of those is assigned a 2 based on the block group that they live within. Now, when we go to the school level, what we do is take the percentage of students within each category. So in my little example, again, I made this up. There are 251s, which is 34% of our total population, 402s, which is 54%, and 85 threes, which is 12%. We take the percentage of category 1 times 1 plus the percentage of category 2 multiplied by 2, percentage of category 3 multiplied by 3, and that gives us our diversity index at the school level. So in my fake example, it's 1.78. Anything that's leaning closer to 1, our diversity indices, they're going to be anywhere between 1 and 3. Anything that's closer closer to 1 is less diverse. Anything closer to 3 is more diverse. So if you go to the next page, The map shows each of your block groups colored based on the diversity category that we calculated for it. So ones are going to be in that yellowish orange color. Again, that's less diverse. Twos are going to be in green, and then purples are going to be your most diverse areas. In looking at this, I mean, the northeast side of the district has the majority of the ones. If we look at our boundaries, so if we apply this to all of our boundaries, you can kind of see how that shakes out. So Blue Ridge would be our most diverse building at 2.96. And then our least diverse building, I believe, is John Warner at 1.09. So this is something that we're watching while we draw boundaries. We have a program, it's pretty much Excel, but it allows us to look at a map too. And what we can do is we can change just a little area and it'll automatically update to see what the new socioeconomic status is of that school, what the new EL percentage, the IEP percentage, and the diversity index with a change like that. There aren't any limits that we're placing on this, but we do want to just keep watch on it. Any move that we make, as much as possible and where possible, we are trying to improve it and get it closer to the district-wide average where possible.
Would it be fair to say that a 2 would be a balanced? Okay.
Yeah, so actually at the elementary level, your average for all elementary students across the district is 2.12.
And I see Paxton Keeley falls at 2.01.
They're really close. Parkade is actually the closest at 2.08.
Oh.
Yeah. So they're right there. No, Parkade is a little bit overutilized, so we're gonna have to make some changes there, but they are sitting pretty right close to the district-wide average.
Yep.
At the middle school level, the average is 2.16, and at the high school, it's 2.2. And like I said, this document really goes through everything that I just did as well. And I believe this is probably on your website now too for folks to look through if they're interested. Any questions about the diversity index before I move on to kind of where we are in the process and what we're working on?
The map that's on this page, those are all of our elementary boundaries.
They are, yeah.
The examples that you used for these all came from looking at the same block group.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, I don't
That's
know
what I
which one
thought.
it was, but
Right.
I chose one at random because it gave me a 1, 2, 3, and I liked that for the example.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So moving on, we've started looking at phase 1 options. Again, we're just filling Russell with this phase 1 changes. We're not trying to make any big changes anywhere else. They are increasing capacity by about 168 seats, so we need to fill that space. Pending enrollment projections, which I believe should be available within the next week or so, we have a couple different options for this. Something I want to note about Russell is the location of the new school. So the new school is just south of Mill Creek, okay? I will just tell you, after going through some of these, it is going to be tough if we pull in an area south of Russell into Russell, because we may need to move those kids again once the new school opens, which is something we are actively trying to avoid in this process. We really, really do not want to move students 1 year in one phase just to move them again in another phase. So that being said, we are looking at options mostly on the north side for Russell. That is just because we want to avoid those double moves where possible. Once we open the new school, you know where it is. It's going to relieve Beulah Ralph and Mill Creek and Rockbridge a little bit too. So Mill Creek is probably going to need to move north a little bit. That boundary line is, and that's north of Mill Creek is Russell. So that's why we're trying to look at areas north on the north side right now. I do think we have two pretty good options for that. I'm not going to get into them tonight, but we we did find the right amount of students, again, pending those enrollment projections. If we're not going to see any major changes in enrollment at Russell, then we're pretty comfortable with those. But if we're going to see an influx of 60 kids, that's just going to naturally fill that building.
Right.
I mean, that would be ideal. I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be the best. So I did want to go through just a little how I'm drawing options. So what I did is I broke your district up into about 300 different little pieces, and that's what you're seeing on this right now. The white lines, they're called planning units, and that's what I'm using to assign areas to schools. It's essentially a big puzzle. I take the areas and I assign them to different schools. If it doesn't work, then I put them back. If it does work, great, then I keep moving on. But that's how we're kind of initially drawing these options. Once we get a little bit further along, we'll be looking in closer, like at the parcel level. But these pretty much take into account neighborhoods, major roads, things like that, and your current boundaries, and actually your last set of boundaries too, because that just made it for a pretty easy way to get started with them. So
Which dot is Russell on this map?
So Russell, okay, Russell has a bizarre boundary. It kind of has like some tentacles. Yeah, it's this one right here. Yeah,
In this purple.
yeah.
Okay.
The magenta is Fairview.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so the green dots are going to be your
I figured
elementary
out
schools.
some of them, and then
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out where does Russell fall. Okay, that helps me.
Yeah, I should have labeled those. So the next thing I kind of want to get into is the complexities of this. During our focus group meetings, which were excellent, we got some really great information from folks from our focus groups. There really is a desire to balance socioeconomics across the district. Some think that is the only priority we should be moving forward with. Others thought, okay, maybe it's not the most important priority, but if we can make a move in the right direction, we should, without completely, I don't know, getting rid of the neighborhood school model that kind of takes into account transportation. So I wanted to share with you these student density maps. On the left, we have all students. So this is showing students grades K through 12. Anything in green is showing lower student density or fewer students per square mile. And then the reds are showing higher student density or more students per square mile, up to 1,000 students per square mile. So I don't think this is going to be overly shocking to anybody. You can kind of see where our hotspots are and where we see big populations. On the right, we have our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. So these are going to be the students that are receiving free and reduced lunch. Both maps are to the same scale. So red means the same thing on the left as it does on the right. And you can kind of see the complexity with this. It's not evenly distributed across the district. So in order to draw boundaries that perfectly balance our buildings, there are going to be some ugly boundaries. I'll just be frank. They're either that or it's going to look like I just dropped a bunch of Skittles on the map because we would have to have a bunch of islands everywhere in order to perfectly balance. Now, it's easier to do at the high school level where our boundaries are much bigger. But when we start looking at elementaries, which hold way fewer students, it is much more difficult. So I want to move on to the next map, and I want to preface this by saying this is not an option. But I call it the Hickman hug because Hickman kind of hugs each of the other boundaries. You know, I got some good feedback about my name that I gave it. But looking at this, if we were to balance our high schools perfectly, socioeconomic-wise, EL and IEPs, and our diversity index, more than likely the option would look like this. This is probably the only way to do this with keeping contiguous boundaries. There are certainly more ways to draw this if we start introducing islands, which I don't think is a priority of the board. So again, this is not an option, but it was something that was requested a couple different times during our focus group meetings. And I wanted to draw it because I think it's worth illustrating what we would need. Yep, blue is Hickman, red is Rockbridge. Yes.
So, wow, lots of people live in a tiny little spot.
They sure do.
Rockbridge.
They sure do.
I mean, that's what it looks like. Wow.
And that's where the
so
growth
I
is,
would have
too.
I would have said green was Battle, pink was Hickman, and blue is Rockbridge. Okay.
Not so much. I mean, if you ignore the map and look at the metrics, they're pretty good. I'm pretty proud of what I was able to put together for the metrics, but the map just doesn't make sense. The elephant in the room in all of our focus group meetings was transportation. I don't think anybody brought it up but me and Randy. So this would be a transportation nightmare. It would be very difficult to get kids to school, especially when we are limited with our resources, which is kind of a new problem for Columbia Public Schools and really everybody across the country. There's a transportation shortage.
I remember one year when we had some overcrowding. It was right before we switched to the middle school model. So we had middle schools and junior highs. For 1 year, kids in Parkade, that is over by Cosmo Park, had to be bused to Gentry, which is down by Rockbridge High School. And it was about a 45-minute drive. So I can understand the concern about transportation. Not only the cost, but, the factor of travel and parents.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we'd probably have kids getting on the bus at like 5:30 or 6 in something like this. It's not great. And I told you it was going to be ugly. Right. But it does illustrate what we're dealing with. I mean, Columbia Public Schools does not control housing. It doesn't control where Section 8 housing is built. It doesn't control where families live. So we are dealt the cards that we're dealt. And this is what we would need to do in order to have perfect balance across the board.
I do have another question. The map is for illustrative purposes. The numbers, are those real numbers?
Yeah, those are the actual, if this were to go into effect, these are the actual numbers. So, like I said, the numbers look really good. The thing I haven't mentioned yet is we're moving about half of our high school population as well. Almost, it's like over 2,000 students. So a lot of change for a lot of people when we probably could get away with just moving a couple hundred high school students to balance what we need to balance.
This model also moves Battle to 100% utilization
It does.
in comparison to where they're at now, which I think we're at 80 something.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have about 1,500 students.
Yeah, Battle's at 86%. And our most diverse high school, according to the diversity index.
Yeah.
Right.
As we get further along in this process, we'll have additional options to share with you. I don't know that they'll look like this, but we will certainly keep this in our back pocket because it's good for illustrative purposes, that it responds to what we needed to respond to. It's just not, I think it's more drastic than folks were thinking it would be. And that's really all I have. My last slide is just reiterating the timeline. So are there any other questions about any of this or how we're drawing options or diversity index? I know the diversity index is kind of a lot to take in.
I don't know if this is a question for you or maybe Heather or Dr. Yearwood. The capacity, I know we've got a number of capacity, but I also know I don't know exactly how they figure capacity. I know a couple of years ago there was talk of a space utilization audit because different buildings are laid out different ways and you have different abilities to do different things in those buildings. Is space utilization figured out with capacity, or maybe this is a Randy question and he's not here, so I don't know.
So we had our architect do the actual space utilization, the numbers that we use now, like when we're talking about space, about the utilization that shows up, and that's what was given when they started doing this work even 5 years ago. But we all know, education has changed, that there's a lot more flexible seating, so it's not just lining kids up in a classroom necessarily. There's might be a little bit of flexibility. I know it's we don't want it just to be equal to fire code numbers. It's a difference between what's actually useful in the classrooms, and so there was some of those things taken into consideration when we were removing trailers and when we were planning for some of the growth and the builds of the new schools over the last maybe 8 or 10 years ago. But that's where the numbers come from now.
And something to note about Rockbridge is that does not include the Career Center. That is just like the comprehensive high school. Any other questions or requests as we're starting to look at options?
Well, I'll let people think, and what I'll just do is a recap for folks that are listening or do listen to this. To our Russell Boulevard families, April 1st is that day to like really keep in mind. That is when that listening session is going to be happening, that open listening session, open house for what that attendance area would look like for
From
phase
4 to
one.
7. 4 to 7. It's already
Oh, yeah.
Yep, at the media center.
4 to 7 p.m. in the media center at Russell. The board then is looking at potentially making a decision either on April 18th or May 13th for that when it comes to Russell. For the remainder of our district, and this is something I just continually wanting to reiterate because I think at first we talked around this being around elementary because the new elementary school is being built, and a lot of people think it's just impacting elementary still. We are looking at boundaries for all grades. And that the phase 2 and phase 3 will probably be impacting all grade levels. And so that May 7th through 9th dates, those are the 2 days where that open house is going to happen for phase 2 and phase 3. It sounds like there's going to be multiple options during the weekday, like during the work hours, those 2 days, and in the evening for people to go. It's open style. So there isn't like you have to come at the start and stay till the end. You can come and be a part and share things. The other thing for our community to understand is that we are going to have that online survey that will start on April 29th and go all the way to May 10th. And that same information that will be accessible in that survey is the same information that will be at the open house. So a wonderful thing to do if you want to go to the open house is to look at the survey. Look at all that information preliminary before going to that open houses on the May 7th and May 9th, and then go and ask the questions and then fill out the survey so that we can have that information. And then after all that's compiled, on May 13th, the board will get an update on some possible phase 2, phase 3 things that come out of that feedback or what y'all are looking at to make as adjustments potentially to what was presented to the community. And then on June 10th, we'll have a presentation of final options and feedback. And then July 8th is when the board is scheduled to vote on those phase 2 and phase 3s, which will impact the rest of the district, not Russell. Russell's will be voted on April 18th or May 13th. And the Russell phase 1 will go into effect for this coming school year, 2024-2025. Oh, totally. That's why I did all this recap to help with thinking.
I'm sorry. So, in your example, and like you said, it's real numbers, right, for the high schools. I'm assuming that you're looking at, growth or consecutive year models, because I know the last data that we got, I think it's in our finance budget that we approved, it looks like in the next 10 years, Hickman actually increases by 200 students. And so that's something you're taking into consideration as well when we're figuring this out. Okay.
Yeah, it definitely is. We're updating those enrollment projections too.
Good.
So
Thank
we'll
you.
have an entire another year of birth data to go off of, and another year of historical enrollment to use as well.
Wonderful. I'm excited to see those
Yep.
numbers.
And
Thanks.
you should get those pretty soon. Okay. They're almost complete.
Great. Thanks.
The only thing I would add to Blake's summary is even if you're not impacted, we want you to take the survey. I cannot tell you how important that feedback is throughout this entire process. Don't feel like your voice doesn't matter if you aren't being impacted in any of our options. We certainly want to hear from you. We want to hear from the community as a whole. So please, 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 I urge you to take the survey regardless if you're impacted or not.
And I would reiterate, even if you think you're not impacted, please open that survey up, because the last one I thought there's no way I'll be impacted. And one of the 4 options would have shown that I was impacted. So it's important for everyone to look at that just to check and provide feedback. So thank you.
And something we'll be doing this time around that we've started kind of implementing throughout all of our processes is asking for an address when we're getting survey data so that we can pinpoint exactly who we're hearing from. That way, if there's a community that's impacted that we aren't hearing from, we know about it and we can go to them. The last time in this process, we actually had a couple different focus group meetings with the options because we knew we weren't hearing from certain communities that were heavily impacted. So we went to them to try to get that feedback because it's very, very important.
Well, seeing no more discussion, thank you so much. And thank you for all of this work. It is a hard thing, and we appreciate the fact that you help us with it. And we know it's a deeply emotional thing for our community, and nothing is taken lightly as we're making these decisions and the models that you help create in those conversations with the focus groups and with the feedback we're going to be getting. And so just thank you. And thank you to everyone who's on this committee for helping and providing guidance at times and feedback. And then to my board colleagues, thanks for endeavoring when we have to make this decision. I think this will be my third boundary vote. And so it's hard. It is not an easy thing. So with that, I will ask, is there a motion to adjourn? Do
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
you have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please do the same. All right, we are adjourned at 6:22.